Have you ever experienced this? You open Instagram and it seems like the whole world is already rich, successful, and insanely happy, and then you meet a real millionaire and he's silent, calm, simple. In this video, I'll explain why those who truly earn money rarely talk about it, and why this very silence is the key to real wealth. Have you ever noticed a strange paradox? Those who truly possess wealth, in a financial, inner, or life wealth, rarely talk about it. They don't post photos from convertibles, don't shoot videos in front of rented yachts, and don't shout, "I'm a winner." Their silence echoes louder than any motivational post. And that silence, it's not shyness, it's strength. Because wealth loves silence. Not because the wealthy have something to hide, but because they no longer need to prove anything. In our noisy world, where success is often measured by views and followers, modesty almost seems suspicious. Yet it is the truest sign of depth, because those who truly work on themselves don't shout. They build. Internally, systematically, day by day. And one day, when everyone else has lost interest, they stand like a silent mountain. Strong, steady, unshakable. In this video, I'll share not just reflections, but my personal journey. How I learned to speak less and listen more. How I realized that money doesn't flow to the loudest, but to the most consistent, and that real influence doesn't scream, it acts. Ready to go deeper? Because this won't be about how to become popular, it'll be about how to become real. And at the end of the video, practical steps on how to make that silence your new wealth. I remember the moment when my mentor, Mr. Schoff, first told me, "Jim, true wealth isn't in the wallet, it's in the person who fills that wallet." And at the time, I didn't quite understand. Young, eager, I dreamed of status, a new car, and the applause from the crowd as I walked onto the stage. But he didn't smile. He just added, "If you are rich enough inside, you won't need to shout. People will feel it." Later, I found out he was right. Wealth, like respect, doesn't rush. And it doesn't like noise. It comes to those who work quietly for a long time, to those who know not just how to act, but how to observe, to those who focus more on developing themselves than on impressing others. Now tell me honestly, haven't you ever felt that today, success plays more for the camera than works behind the scenes? That instead of discipline, the illusion of instant triumph is being sold? On social media, everything is fast, flashy, loud. But real money doesn't live on TikTok. It lives in the silence of early mornings, in daily habits, in giving up instant gratification for the sake of a bigger goal. When I hit rock bottom, no money, no ideas, no prospects, I learned to listen, not just to others, but to myself, and most of all, to stay silent. Because silence is a tool of self-discovery. In it, true needs become visible. In it, you find out who you really are when there's no applause, no support, no likes. Once I was sitting in the back row of a hall where a famous millionaire was speaking. All eyes were on him, cameras, lights, attention. But my gaze landed on another man in the audience. He was dressed simply, silent, showing no emotion. But his eyes, they radiated calm and depth. Later I learned he was the investor, the real millionaire, the one who funded the speaker. And that's when I realized the one who truly leads stays quiet because he doesn't need the stage. That was the first mental shift in my philosophy. And I began to change myself, not to impress, but to strengthen. I started waking up earlier, read more, learned to quietly set aside part of my income, didn't brag about new purchases, just worked. And gradually, almost unnoticed, what I had longed for finally arrived. Stability, awareness, inner peace. And with it, money. Because money loves stability. It runs from noise, drama, emotional immaturity, and you know how it behaves? Like a bird that won't land on the shoulder of someone flailing, but it will surely come to the one who sits calmly, confidently, knowing what they're doing. And if you're like a rock, something great can be built on you. I remember once being offered a deal, quick profit, lots of promises. Investors wanted a loud campaign, and I turned it down. Why? Because when something is too loud, it lacks strength. Loud music often hides emptiness, but silence, it reveals essence. Look at the most successful entrepreneurs. They're not filming videos counting money. They're building businesses, caring for their families, growing gardens. Silence is their tool of the trade. They don't chase approval, they chase results. Have you ever seen an oak tree make noise while growing? No, but it grows deeply, quietly, and one day it's visible from afar. Because you don't need to shout to be strong, you need to be deep. And depth gives you roots that withstand storms. I often say, Work on yourself so that your results speak for you. Not a post, not a photo, not a video, but your state, your presence, your energy. They're louder than any words. When you walk into a room and people feel your strength, you won't feel the need to prove anything anymore. And then silence becomes your currency. So now I turn to you. What are you building in silence when no one is watching? What traits are you training? What habits are you planting in the soil of your life? Because it's there, in the silence, that your capital is growing, your resources, your character. And in silence, there's no temptation to show off results too soon, because the one who reveals unripe fruit loses the entire harvest. But that's not all. In the next section, I'll share how silence not only helped me accumulate financial wealth, but also build a reputation that works without me having to say a word. It's a story I haven't shared publicly before, and it will help you see that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. One day, when I was already a well-known speaker, I was invited to speak at a private gathering for a very select group of entrepreneurs. There were no cameras, no posters, just a circle of chairs, a few serious people, and a silence where everything mattered. After my talk, a man approached me. Gray hair, direct gaze, hands a bit rough but strong. He said, I've been watching you for the past 10 years. I wasn't intrigued by what you said. I was intrigued by what you didn't say between the words. Then he added, that is wealth. At that moment, it felt like I had received the highest praise of my life, because a person who truly sees will always notice not what you show, but what you carry. We live in a time where silence has become almost suspicious. If you didn't post a photo from your trip, did you even travel? If you didn't show your watch, maybe you don't have one. But that's just a movie, and the question isn't who's the lead actor. The question is, who's the director? Because real life doesn't need editing, it needs silence. I built my first business not on noise, but on consistency. While others were shouting about new opportunities, I was working. While someone was filming their successful day, I was reading books on financial literacy and learning to count profits without emotion. While someone invested in a brand, I invested in skills. And when the time came to make a move, I was ready, not for the show, for the result. That was my second mental turning point. I stopped trying to prove I was someone, and I became someone. Because what is real success? It's not when you buy a car you can't maintain, and not when you film a video in a hotel you stayed at for the weekend. Real success is when you quietly walk past the temptation to show off and just keep building. Because you know, what has true value doesn't need rehearsal in front of the mirror, it lives inside you. I remember a young entrepreneur inspired by motivational videos came up to me after a seminar and asked, Mr. Rohn, how can I create the image of a successful man? And I looked at him, smiled, and replied, don't create an image, create a person. Because an image disappears when the lights go out. But a person is who remains in the dark. Silence is a power that scares those who aren't ready to face themselves because it reveals everything. And if there's emptiness, it becomes even more obvious. But if there's self-work, if there are real values, they shine without a word, because presence doesn't shout, it acts. Let me share another story. In my early years, I had a habit of sharing every new idea with all my friends. I was energetic, believing that motivation was the engine. But every time I spoke, something seemed to melt away. Energy went into the words, not the action. And I noticed, the more I talked, the less I did. One day, Mr. Schaaf told me, true motivation is action, not speech. Spend your energy on steps, not words. And I changed my approach. That's when I started doing things quietly. I set goals and stayed silent. Worked and stayed silent. Achieved and stayed silent. And you know what happened? People began asking me, Jim, what are you doing? And that's when I realized when results are real, they speak for themselves. Now ask yourself honestly, what does your silence say? Because it is also a language. It says whether you are building or just dreaming, whether there's a foundation inside or just a facade. And when you learn not to fear silence, you'll see how life begins to reveal new levels. Wealth doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't beg for recognition. It simply comes to those who are ready to hold it. Because money, besides, is also a test, and not everyone who receives it knows how to keep it. Silence is a rehearsal for strength. It's the space where stability is formed. That's why the best investors are always calm people. They aren't swayed by charts. They don't react to panic. They analyze. They think. And they stay quiet. Then so they act. And now, in this very moment, as you listen to my words, ask yourself, if no one saw you, if no one judged, liked, or commented, would you still walk the same path you're on now? Would you still do what you do if no one ever found out? Because that's where the real answer lies, whether your wealth is real. But this isn't the end. In the third part, I'll share how silence gave me not only financial independence, but something even more valuable, freedom. And I'll show you how to use it as a tool in today's loud world. There will be another unexpected twist, and a new perspective through which you'll see yourself. I promised to tell you about freedom, and yes, that word, it's almost a cliche. You see it on t-shirts, tattoos, motivational posts, but few truly understand what it means. Because real freedom isn't about being able to buy anything, it's when you no longer need to prove anything. And this is where silence comes in. After decades of working on myself, tens of thousands of hours on stage, and even more in the silence between events, I suddenly realized I no longer want to demonstrate anything. I want to act calmly, to give without needing gratitude, to be regardless of judgment. And in that inner silence, I finally found the space where true wealth lives, the wealth of the soul. I once lived in a modest-looking house. Next door was a neighbor who had a new car every season, loud parties, blaring music, and you know what was interesting? His whole life was on display. And one evening when he came over and said, "Jim, I envy your silence," I realized that it had value, the value of real peace, because he had everything except peace. There's something almost magical about silence. It disciplines, it purifies, it teaches, but most of all, it brings the truth to the surface, like water. Silence reveals the bottom. If there's chaos inside, it gets louder. But if there's depth, it starts to shine. That's why silence is the ally, not just of the financially wealthy, but the spiritually wealthy. It doesn't hide, it reveals. And that's why it's frightening to those who haven't built anything within themselves. Remember how I said freedom isn't about a flexible schedule? It's when you no longer depend on applause, no longer need approval, no longer worry about what others say. And that inner independence, that's the greatest wealth I've gained. If I were told right now, "Jim, no one will see you. You can either quietly keep growing or stop loudly and enjoy the attention," I'd choose growth, in silence, because that's where my strength lies. And here's another thing I've learned. Silence is a choice, not from weakness, from strength. The one who stays silent when they could shout, that's the one who has mastered themselves, and thus mastered their future. Because silence is like water in a reservoir. There's plenty, but it doesn't flood everything. It waits, deep, potential, and when it's time, it becomes action. One more story. I was speaking in Los Angeles when a young man approached me during a break. He looked very successful, the watch, the suit, the confidence, and he said, "I dream of being like you. But how do you stay balanced when the whole world wants a show?" I said, "The world wants a show until a crisis hits. Then it looks for a leader. And silence, that's the marker of a leader. Because when you quietly stay the course, others start to follow. Not because of noise, because of presence." I've seen people who started loudly disappear within a year, and I've seen those who worked silently for 10 years on one project and created something great. Great, not by likes, great by impact. Now, when I mentor young leaders, I tell them your best strategy is depth, and it begins in silence. That's where decisions are born. That's where plans mature. That's where you grow while others perform. One more moment, a personal one. After my mentor passed away, I spent the evening alone. No phone, no music, no people. I just sat and remembered. And that night, I realized for the first time that legacy isn't left through speeches, it's left through presence. And when I'm gone, I don't want people to remember my words. I want them to remember the strength I passed on in silence. Because silence is a voice that doesn't need language. Friend, if you've listened this far, then something inside you must have resonated. Maybe you're tired of the chase. Maybe you're searching for inner ground. Maybe you feel that what's real never shouts. Then let me tell you, you're already on the right path. Because the road to true wealth is always a silent one. But this still isn't the end. Next comes the practical part. I'll show you how to train this inner silence, how it becomes your anchor in chaos, and how it can attract not just money, but respect, stability, clarity. Get ready to take action, because silence is not passivity, it's preparation for a great move. Well, now it's time to take a pause. Not a pause in the video, but a pause within. Because right now, I don't want you to just listen. I want you to engage. All these stories, ideas, principles, they're not just words, they're a mirror. And now, it's time to look into it. Imagine silence around you, no one prompting you, no one judging, just you and your inner voice. And I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Simple, but powerful. Rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 means this doesn't describe me at all, and 10 means this is completely true for me. Ready? Let's begin. First question, how calmly do you react to someone else's success without comparisons or jealousy? Because inner silence is when someone else's win doesn't create anxiety. It's like the ocean. There's room for everyone. Give yourself a quick score. No overthinking. Second question. How often do you take action without telling others about it? Wealth comes to those who know how to keep their focus inward, not outward. Are you a creator or a performer on stage? Means I always share before I act. Means I work quietly and then the results speak for themselves. Third question, how confident do you feel when no one notices your efforts? This is one of the strongest tests, because when there's no applause, only the true motive remains. If you keep going, without approval, likes, or recognition, that's the silence of strength. Fourth question, do you have a daily quiet practice? Time without screens, without noise, just you and your thoughts? This could be a morning journal, an evening walk, 10 minutes of silence with coffee. If you do this, you're already building wealth. If not, maybe now is the time to start. Fifth question, how willing are you to stay invisible while building something great? This question goes deeper than it seems. Everyone wants the result, but not everyone can endure the silence of the process. Give yourself a score and simply notice how the answer feels. These questions aren't a test, not an exam. They're a conversation with yourself. If you want, revisit them after the video, grab a pen, write them out, look your answers in the eye. But even just thinking about them, you've already taken the first step. Now, a few words to close this section. If this video gave you even one answer, hit like. It helps the algorithm spread this wisdom. If you feel like this is about you, subscribe, because it's going to get even deeper. And if you feel like it, drop a word in the comments that resonated most with you. Silence, balance, freedom, or something that arose in you, because sometimes a single word is like a doorway. Now, take a deep breath. And now, silence, the real kind. Not a broadcast pause, not a break in the video, but that moment when everything inside finally falls into place. We've taken a long journey together, from outer noise to inner depth, from showy success to quiet strength, from likes to self-respect. And now, I want to say one thing. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to be yourself, to be real. Wisdom doesn't go live. It lives in daily decisions, in morning habits, in restraint, in the choice to stay silent when the world expects noise. And if you took anything from this video, let it be this. Don't be afraid to build in silence, because anything truly great always begins in silence. I've seen people change not after loud success, but after an internal decision, quiet but irreversible. And maybe right now you've just made one of those decisions. Not dramatic, no soundtrack in the background, just real, simple, quiet, strong. And finally, I want to leave you with one thought I repeated to myself for many years. Don't be afraid to walk slowly. Be afraid to stop, especially when you already know where you're going. And only silence helps you hear that direction, because only in silence can you hear the voice of your own life. If this video was valuable to you, share it with those who, like you, are building themselves, not for display, but for depth. And from here, there's more to come, more silence, more strength, more of your true self, because true wealth always comes from within. See you soon, and remember, wealth loves silence, so learn to grow richer in silence. Day by day, step by step, word by word, quietly, but forever.